Hello, everyone. I hope you're well, and I hope I find you enjoying the Lord's sufficiency this week. Just wanted to share a short thought from the Word with you all, and today, something that ties in with our study in the book of Exodus. And I actually want to bring you inside our barn, a barn that is over 100 years old and predates the Doukhobors who lived on our farm some time ago. And this week, the Lord has been using it to remind me of a few things that I'd like to share with you. So, come on inside. Welcome to the barn. I won't give you the grand tour today, but there's not an awful lot to see other than a few old logs still barely hanging on and a fair bit of hay stacked up ready to feed some animals. But as we're here, I wanted to read for you a few verses out of the book of Amos that God has been using this week to remind me of a few things. Amos chapter 7 and verse 7 says this: "This is what he showed me, and behold, the Lord was standing beside a wall built with a plumb line in his hand. And the Lord said to me, Amos, what do you see? And I said, a plumb line. The Lord said, behold, I am setting a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. I will never again pass by them. The high places of Isaac shall be made desolate, and the sanctuaries of Israel shall be laid waste, and I will rise against the house of Jeroboam with the sword." Now, as God is preparing judgment on the people, he declares that a plumb line is going to be put in the midst of the people. And I often think about that plumb line because without it, it's so hard to know what is straight, what is right. It's so hard to know what the reference point is. You think if you're standing in the middle of a forest full of trees, what could you possibly pick as the right standard of truth? And that plumb line that he spoke of, I have one here, and what made me think of this barn is the fact that as you kind of look around, it really is hard to say what's straight, what's up, and what's down in here. In fact, there's so many angles and logs, but as soon as you bring a plumb line, and again, a plumb line is that perfectly balanced weight, that when it hangs, it is perfectly vertical. And so if I were to hang a plumb line in this barn, you'd laugh, because from the outside, things are deceiving. But from the inside, let's see if I can hang this up here. When we hang a plumb line, and you begin to look, I hope you can see it on the camera, but if you see just how off this barn is, that this beam is leaning hard, and in fact, this barn is leaning so far over that the previous owner built an extension on the barn and made it a freestanding structure so that this barn can lean on it. And in fact, if you ever wanted to collapse the center out, the oldest part, you could. You don't really know what's actually vertical until you hang a plumb line. And now you have a reference point. You know what's off, what needs to be fixed and corrected. And I think in days like we're living now, you can turn on the TV, and it's so easy to think, I'm doing well, or I live a good life, or I'm righteous, when you compare yourselves to the things you see others doing. But when you do that, you're comparing yourself to things that aren't necessarily the standard of truth. It's easy to feel good about yourself when you compare yourself to someone else. In fact, when people wanted to know the Apostle Paul's qualifications for being an apostle, he said, I do not dare to compare myself with those who compare themselves with themselves. He wanted to compare himself only to the standard of truth that was found in God alone. And as we're studying the book of Exodus together, it was a great reminder that as we're about to dive into the 10 commandments, or those 10 statements of God, a group of people whose standard, who all they had to compare themselves with was the Egyptians who had enslaved them, who had worshipped so many gods around them. And in many ways, as they began to walk forward in a relationship with God, if that were their standard, then they were lining themselves up with something that wasn't straight to begin with. And so God was preparing in that moment. He was about to show them the reference point, holiness, his character. And so as we go on in the week, and as we prepare ourselves for this next Sunday, as we're going to be spending some time in the book of Exodus and those 10 commandments, I thought it appropriate to pull out the plumb line. And as we begin to see what is true, it begins to show us just how far off those that aren't are. And I hope that we can already begin identifying in our lives some of those things that we've been measuring ourselves up to that aren't the true line. Some of those things that have become our standard of doing good or doing well in our walk and way. And as we begin to see God speak, that we'd begin to realize that as those things are false standards, we'd lay them aside and come to the one and only standard, that is the God of truth. So wherever you are this week, and whatever circumstances the Lord has you in, I hope he's been reminding you with that truth written on your heart of that true and righteous standard, and that you would measure up to him alone. And I look forward to the time together on Sunday in which we'll dive in and look a little deeper at what some of those things are and how it was God intended for them to live in the midst of a fallen world. Thanks for your time, and again, I hope you're doing well, and I do look forward to our time connecting together, and we'll look forward to what the Lord has for us in the days ahead. All for now, take care, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.